Okay, we're on Daf Mem Tes Amud Aleph, the top of the Gemara. The Gemara is a very interesting thing. What the Gemara does in the first Amud, basically until the Mishnah. This is one of those why to be like the Rambam and the Rosh and the Shulchan Aruch and to be real like early Paiskim, you have to know all of Shas, because the Gemara is now going to have a conversation that you'd think we would have had a conversation in Daf Beis of Zvachim. We've been talking in the beginning of Zvachim about Shaloi Lishma. Right? If you have Shaloi Lishma, it invalidates the carbon. Most carbonas, it's just you're not Yotze, but it's still, you could still do the Zrika, and then Pesach and Chatas, it's completely ruined. So the Shaila the Gemara is going to have, basically, just to say it outside, is what if you have Shaloi Lishma, but it's accidental? Meaning, to me, it's fine. I would have just assumed, accidental is also a problem. Like, it doesn't have to be on purpose. The Gemara now is going to have this discussion. Perhaps the whole concept of Shaloi Lishma is when it's bemezid. Meaning, you legitimately know it's a chatas, and I think oila, or you know it's a shlomim, and I think toida, whatever. What if I legitimately got confused? It was a mistake. What's a mistake? Does that also invalidate the carbon? Again, it's a funny thing because you'd think we would have had this conversation 150 days ago. But that's the Gemara's discussion. So says the Gemara, Tani, Rabba, Barav Chana, Kamei de Rav. Kivse Atzeres. So you have the Kvasim. So Kvasim are 1 year old and they're a Shlomim. Okay? And you shechted, Sheshachtan L'shum Elim, thinking they're rams. Now, when you read this Gemara simply, it sounds like I think it's the right carbon, but instead of a ram is a 2-year-old lamb. So instead of a 1-year-old, I think it's 2 years old. But that's not, because you could misage the animal. That doesn't matter. So Rashi and the Mefarshim explain what it means is, instead of thinking it's a kvasim, which is a 1-year-old, I think it's an oila of shavuos, which is a 2-year-old. So in other words, I had the wrong carbon in mind. It's a classic shaloi lishma. So what's the halacha? Ksherin v'lo yolu b'aylim shem chova. Simple. You had shaloi lishma by a shlamim. Unlike the discussion yesterday, the Gemara assumes, okay, so it's kosher, but you're not Yotze. Simple, this is pretty Aleph based. Comes Rav, Amarle Rav, Alu, no, you're Yotze. What are you talking about? You're Yotze. So now Rav is now telling us that Shloi Lishma it's fine. So this is a strange thing. Where is Rav coming from? So says the Gemara, kosher means that it's a kosher carbon, but you're not Yotze. It's a standard Shloi Lishma. It's kosher that it can be spilled, the blood can be sprinkled on the mizbeach. What you get out of that is that the blood can be sprinkled on the mizbeach. And you could eat the carbon. That's what you get out of it. So says the Gemara, Rav says, no, you're Yotze. It's a full-fledged carbon, no problem. So that's a pella. So it says, Rav Chizda, Mistabra Milsi de Rav. Rav Chizda says, we have to understand, where is Rav coming from? It's a Shaloi Lishma. Why is this okay? So says Rav Chizda, I only understand Rav in the following situation, which is, Savar Elim v'shachtam l'shum kvasim. Basically, you have this shlomim over here. I'm going to, instead of elim and kvasim, because those are rams and lambs, those are a little confusing, I'm going to use the word shlomim and an ola. It's a shlomim. It seems like Rav's case is where I shechted the shlomim thinking it's an ola. That should be a classic issue. Says Rav, it's fine. What's going on? Why would that be? So says Rav Chizda, I'll tell you the only way I could understand Rav. The case is where it's a shlomim. It's not that I shechted thinking it's an ola. It's actually the following thing. I walk over to it thinking it's an ola. I'm mistaken. And then I shechted b'shem shlamim, meaning I lucked out. I did the wrong one from what I thought it was, but it turns out I was right the whole time. In other words, I walk over to a shlamim, and if you'd ask me, what is that? I'd be like, oh, it's an ola. In my head, I think it's an ola, and then I shechted l'shem shlamim. So I did the wrong thing in my mind, but it turns out I lucked out. It turns out like I hit jackpot because I actually did shecht it thinking shlamim, and it was a shlamim. Now, I actually originally thought I thought I was messing up, but I wasn't. So says Rav Chizda, that's the only time Rav feels it's okay. And on that, the Tanna Kama feels it's a problem, because at the end of the day, even though you ended up lucking out, you thought you shechted the wrong thing. For some reason, that's an issue. But the point is, so Rav Chizda is minimizing Rav. Rav Chizda is saying, listen, if you think it's the wrong carbon, of course it's a problem. Rav's only okay if you actually lucked out. So the case is, Kesaver Shem Elim. You actually think it's an oila, but it's not. V'shachtem l'shem kvasim, and then you shecht it thinking it's a shlamim. So you think you messed up, but you actually lucked out. That's when Rav says it's okay. But shari kvasim l'shem kvasim nishatu, because at the end of the day, it is a shlamim, and you shechted it thinking it's a shlamim. You thought you were making a mistake, but you weren't. But aval kasaver elim v'shachtem l'shem elim. But let's say you go over to the shlamim, and you legitimately think it's an ola, and you shecht it as an ola. That's a problem. That's a classic problem. It's accidental, it's a mistake, it's not on purpose. Akira betos, have akira. Shaloi lishma by shoigeg is a problem. Meaning akira betos, you had the wrong machshava betos, not on purpose, it's accident, but that's a problem. Which I think is what we would all assume. Says the Gemara, Rabbi disagrees. Rabbi says, no, akira betos lo have akira. No. For it to invalidate a carbon shaloi lishma, you have to know what you're doing. If you go over to a shlomim and you legitimately think it's an ola and you shech that as an ola, but it's a legitimate mistake, kosher. It's only a problem if you say, I know it's a shlomim ola and I do it on purpose. That's what Rabbi is mechadish. Now this is a tremendous chiddush because this makes you rethink a lot of what we've been talking about at the beginning of Zvachim. So now the Gemara is going to analyze Rabba's shita. Because again, according to Rabba is saying that no, the gufa machloikis Rav and the Tanakama is where you did it on purpose. Rav feels that it's not a problem, and the Tanakama does. But according to Akira b'tos lo have Akira, meaning according to Rabba, that's gufa the machloikis Rav and the Tanakama. According to Rav, an accident is not a problem. The Tanakama says yes. But according to Rabba, in the sheet of Rav, if you have shaloi l'shma b'shoigeg, it's fine.
But only b'shma b'nola?
No, any carbon. Any shaloi l'shma, if it's b'shoigeg, it's fine. It's only b'mezid. Here's the problem. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabba himself said, who said this shita, that b'shoigeg is fine, u'masvina b'shmaited. Rabba anticipated the shaila. He says, I know what you're going to ask me. Here's the following problem. The problem is, how kehanim shepiglu b'migdash. The kehanim, let's say they do pigel. This is a shaila I get asked a lot. I've been asked a lot actually since we started Tzvachim, and that is, it's not a practical because we don't have these anymore. But the shaila is if a kohen goes over and he does pigel, he has pigel thoughts, right? So instead of thinking you could eat, I think I could eat it today, I'm going to eat it tomorrow. Okay, so the kohen does pigel thoughts. Does he have to pay for it? So because he causes you a financial loss. So this brisa says, if it's b'mezid chayiv, if he did it on purpose, you're chayiv. But if it's b'shoigig potter. Okay, let me ask you a question. Stop right there. Shoigig is potter. Wait a minute. I thought there's no such thing as shoigig. I thought you just got finished telling me that like an accidental thought won't do anything. Now you're saying, no. If you have pigel thoughts accidentally, it does invalidate the carbon. I just don't have to pay for it because it's b'shogig. But that implies that it does invalidate the carbon. Shoigig is a thing. If shoigig is not a thing, why are we talking about it? Shoigig is a thing. I may not have to pay for it. Pigel should be this. The Gemara assumes that there's no difference between pigel thoughts and shaloi l'shma, because I'll tell you why. It's actually an interesting point. You could have pigel thoughts that are shaloi l'shma. I'll tell you how. I never thought about this. We always talked about pigel as like a kohen just being crazy, who's just going to be like, I'm going to burn it tomorrow. But it actually could be the following case. If you go over to a chatas, and you're the kohen, how many days do you have to eat it? One day tonight, right? If you think it's a shlamim, you gave yourself an extra day. So in essence, you're saying, I'm going to eat it tomorrow. So every time you think something's a shlamim when it's a chatas, it's both shaloi l'shma and pigel. If you think about it, I never thought about this till just now. So that's an example of a shaloi l'shma pigel thought, shoigig, and it's a thing. So why did Rabbi say? I thought Rabbi's anticipating the shaila. His whole point is that it's only shayich, machsheves, shaloi l'shma, or pigel, all these things. If it's b'mezid, over here it's shoigig. And the Gemara speaks it out. V'tani ala pigul and pigel, meaning it is pigel thoughts if it's b'shoigig. You just don't have to pay for it. Now, heichidami, what's the example of shoigig? Now, obviously, if you go over to a chatas and you say, I know it's a chatas, but I think it's a shlamim. I'm going to eat it like a shlamim. I'm going to eat it the next day. So that's pigel, also shaloi l'shma, but let's say it's pigel. Now, that's not shoigig. If you know it's a chatas and you say, I'm still going to treat it like a shlamim, that's not shoigig. That's on purpose. So what's shoigig? Shoigig is an accident. So you see that shoigig is a thing. So it's a straight up kash on Rabba. Says the Gemara, "V'kom machasher shum shlamim, hay shoigig mezidhu." That's mezid. Elav dekasav shlamimhu. V'kom machasher l'shum shlamim. Uktani pigel. Al makir b'tas havakir. It must be a case you go over to the animal, right? Mezid is one category. We're looking for a shoigig. What's the only category of shoigig? Classic shoigig is you go over to an animal. It's a chatas, but you think it's a shlamim, and you treat it like a shlamim, and you shecht it with shlamim thoughts, and it's pigel. Even though that's an accident. So you see that accidental mentality ruins. So the Gemara says, no, there's another shoigig. You know what's also shoigig in halacha? Someone who knows what they're doing, but they think it's allowed. Meaning, the case of shoigig is where the kohen knows it's a chatas. And he said, I'm going to treat it like a shlom. You say, that's amazing. No. He thinks it's allowed. This kohen legitimately thinks you're allowed to do that. I don't know how he could come to that conclusion, but he thinks it's allowed. Ta bedin mikri shoygig. If you see someone on Shabbos, cooking, and he said, "What are you doing? You're cooking on Shabbos." And he says, "I know." That's not mezid necessarily. You have to ask him, "Do you think it's allowed?" He's like, "You're allowed to cook on Shabbos. It's like Yom Tov." That's shoygig. So you can know what you're doing. It doesn't make it mezid. You just have to think it's allowed. That's the case where it's shoygig. But if he accidentally thinks that it's a shlomim when it's really a chatas, that actually would be allowed. And it would not make pigel at all. That's Rabbi's conclusion. So, according to Rabbi, if it's a legitimate mistake, not that you think it's allowed. I legitimately thought it was a shlomim. I didn't know it was chatas. Then it's not pigel. Now the Gemara has the following kasha. Ma'asiv Reb Zera has the kasha. Reb Shimon Oimer kol hamenacha shenikmetzu shloi l'shman ksheris. V'olu b'aylam m'shem chayva. She'ein hamenachas doiv l'zvachim. Sha'koyim is machvas u'shum archeshes. Ma'aseh machichan l'ashti machvas. Charba b'shum blula. Ma'aseh machichan l'ashti chareva. Aval zvachim enekein shchitachas l'kulan. Kavalachas l'kulan. We've had this many times. And that is Reb Shimon said that although machsheva shaloi l'shma is a problem by animals, it's not a problem by menachos. Why? Because by animals, if I shecht an animal thinking it's a chatas, thinking it's a shlomim, it's the same shechita for both. So you legitimately, it's more considered a mistake. But if I go over to a mincha, which is, let's say, a chareva, so it's supposed to be dry, and I say, I think this is full of oil. It's like, there's no oil there. You can think all you want. Your actions override your thoughts. So this is an example. Let me explain the kasha. So that's the concept by Menachos, that the kemitza of Menachos, machshava shloi l'shma, is not a problem. Why? Meaning it's a problem by the counter, but the equivalent by karbonos would be a problem. But by Menachos, the kemitza is not going to have shloi l'shma according to Rav Shimon, because your actions are overriding your machshava. You could say you think it's a chareva all you want. I know you see what it is. Okay. The Gemara assumes the following. What is the case here? Again, there's a certain case where by a menachos it's fine, but by a regular carbon it's an issue. What's the case here? The Gemara assumes the case is it must be an accident. Why? It must be where I legitimately got confused as to what the carbon is. And then in such a situation, only by the menachos is it okay, but by the carbonos it's a problem. Why does the Gemara assume that? Because the Gemara assumes at this point that if you go over to a mincha, and let's say, what's an example? You think that it's, what's an example? Machvas l'shum marcheshes, okay? The Gemara assumes that if you legitimately know what you're doing, like if you legitimately, I know it's a machvas, but I'm thinking marcheshes, that should be a problem even by a mincha. Meaning the Gemara assumes that there's a situation, there's like a question mark, an equation. Mincha, it's fine. Shchita, it's a problem. What is the case? The Gemara says it must be accident. And by an accident, by the mincha, it's fine because the actions override an accidental thought. But by a regular carbon, it's a problem, not like Rabba. Why? Because if it's actually on purpose, the Gemara assumes at this point that if you actually are doing a machshava that you know is wrong, by a mincha, that should be a problem. It should be a problem on both situations. That's the Gemara's havamina. And therefore, if I now on purpose is out because we assume that there's no distinction on purpose between a mincha and a shchita, it must be the only thing left is accident. And by mincha it's okay because your actions override an accidental thought, but by an actual carbon, accidental thought is a problem. So that's the kasha and Rabba. And the Gemara is going to respond, no. You were assuming that an on purpose thought would be a problem by a mincha. Not true. By a mincha, the chiddush of a mincha is really accidental thoughts are not a problem anywhere. We're only dealing with on-purpose thoughts. And by a mincha, on-purpose thoughts are still fine. Because even though I go over to a machvas and I think, I know it's a marcheshes, the answer is, it's still fine. Why? Because the actions override any thoughts. When you could tell from what someone's doing based on their actions, we don't care about their thoughts. That's the chiddush of the Gemara. And therefore, we're not talking about accidental thoughts at all. We're talking on purpose. And afal pikin by a mincha, it's fine. That's the back and forth of the Gemara. The Gemara says, hey chidami, what's the case that by a mincha is okay, but by a regular carbon is a problem? If it's talking on purpose mistake, the problem is, even by a mincha it should be a problem. But he overrode, he used his machshava on purpose to override the carbon. What do I care what you're doing? I care about what you're thinking. It must be the kasavar marcheshesu. It must be an accidental thought. And dafka by a mincha, an accidental thought is fine, but not by a carbon. The implication is that it's only by a carbon mincha that an accidental thought is fine, but by a regular carbon it's a problem, not like Rabba. And to that Rabba responds, no. Abaya says no. The answer is like as follows. Really, no. Accidental thoughts is fine. both by karbanos and by mincha. And we're talking about on-purpose thoughts. And afal pikin, an on-purpose thought is okay by a mincha. Why? Because your actions override even on-purpose thoughts. The Gemara says, "The kamer ki masechon kimayave Rabbi l'tamei damer Rabba machshava delay minkar pasar achmana machshava de minkar loy pasar achmana." If it's clear that it's just a machshava, but your actions are overriding the machshava, actions win. So taka could be accidental thoughts is fine both by mincha and by a karban. We're talking about on-purpose thoughts. On-purpose thoughts is okay by a mincha because your actions override it. So you could say I know it's a machas, marchesh is marcheshes. If it's a machas, it's a machas. Okay. New topic, a very interesting topic, and that is, we'll read the Mishnah. I'll tell you how the Gemara will try to figure out what this is. The Mishnah says as follows. We'll read the Mishnah and I'll tell you the simple pshat and we'll see how the Gemara concludes. Hatmidim ein ma'akvin es musafin, v'lehem musafin ma'akvin es hatmidim. The carbon tamid, which is the two karbanos every day, the tamid shel shachar, tamid shel ben arboim, they are not contingent on the musaf of Shabbos, and the musaf is not contingent on the tamid. Now, what the simple reading of this Mishnah is that on Shabbos I could bring the tamid even if I don't have the musaf, and I could bring the musaf even if I don't have the tamid. Now, the problem with that reading, that's what the words mean. The problem is it's pretty obvious. Like, why would I think that the musaf and the tamid shel shachar are related to each other? It's a strange. I'm not sure what the havamin is. The way you read the Mishnah is that, like, if you don't have the tamid shel shachar, you could still bring the musaf, and if you don't have the musaf, you could still bring the tamid shel ben arbaim. I'm not sure why I would assume that they're related. What shaykhis does the tamid have to the musaf? And the Gemara will therefore offer a different shot. The Gemara, I'll just spoil it. The Gemara's conclusion is going to be that it means the order doesn't matter. Meaning, if I bring the musaf before the tamid shel shachar, after the tamid shel ben arbaim, it doesn't matter. Now, the reason why that's a chiddush is because we are generally under the impression, someone there? We're under the impression generally that the order very much matters, that the tamid shel shachar is supposed to be the first carbon, tamid shel ben arbaim is supposed to be the last carbon. But that's the Gemara's conclusion of what this Mishnah means, that the tamid and the musaf, the order does not matter. If you bring the tamid first, fine. You bring the musaf first, fine. You bring the tamid shel ben arbaim last, fine. You bring the tamid shel ben the musaf in the afternoon. It doesn't really matter. The order is not as significant. That's the Gemara's conclusion. So it says the Mishnah, "V'loy ha-musaf and makvin zezeh." And the truth is, the musaf is not ma'akiv each other either. Meaning, if let's say it's Shabbos or Shchaydish, okay, so you're supposed to bring two musafs, one for Shabbos and one for Shchaydish, but you only have one. Okay, it's not ma'akiv each other. That makes it a little easier to understand. That even though you're not going to be able to fulfill all the musafs hayoim, one musaf is enough. Okay. Zok the Mishnah weiter. Lo yekrivu keves baboiker. Let's say they did not bring the tamid shel shachar. We'll see why, but they did not bring the tamid shel shachar. So what do? You still bring the tamid shel ben arbaim, meaning don't think that they're a pair. That if you don't have one, you don't have the other. Rather, yakrivu ben arbaim. If for whatever reason they didn't bring the tamid shel shachar, they could at least continue. One aver doesn't. You don't fix one aver by having a second aver. So you don't bring the tamid shel shachar. At least you bring the tamid shel ben arbaim. Zag the Mishnah. Amr of Shimon. Rav Shimon says, whoa, it depends. Emasai. When do you bring the tamid shel ben arbaim if you did not bring the tamid shel shachar? When is b'zman she'yunusim hashogim? If it was accidental or it was against your will. Let's say Klal Yisrael, for whatever reason, God forbid, they say we're not bringing the tamid shel shachar because we don't care. Not that they couldn't, not that it was a mistake. Refuse, mazid. Then Rav Shimon says there's a knas. You refuse to bring the tamid shel shachar, then you don't get to bring the tamid shel ben arbaim. That's Rav Shimon Shita. Aval mayu mazidin v'lo yakrivu keves baboiker lo yakrivu ben arbaim. You're not allowed to bring in the afternoon. Now, every day in the Ketairis, they would take a mana of the Ketairis, they would take a certain amount, they would have half it in the morning, half in the afternoon. So says the Mishnah, Loi hektiru Ketairis baboiker. If they did not bring the morning Ketairis, yaktiru ben arbaim, then they should at least bring it in the afternoon, very similar to the Talmud. So Rav Shimon says, the kula haisakrev ben arbaim. Rav Shimon says, that's what my father said, which is, if they didn't bring in the morning, then they should bring the entire shear in the afternoon, meaning, it's not really half in the morning, half in the afternoon. You're supposed to bring one full shear a day. So we generally split it up, half in the morning, half in the afternoon. But if you didn't bring in the morning half, then bring the whole thing in the afternoon. Says the Gemara, why? Because when they would be mechanech the mizbeach, they would bring the entire shear in the first time to be mechanech it. So you see that the entire shear is supposed to be brought at once, not half and half. Zok the Mishnah weiter. V'loy mizbacha lo el b'tamid shel shachar. When they would have a new mizbeach, the way they would inaugurate the mizbeach was they would bring the tamid shel shachar. That's how they would inaugurate the mizbeach. V'loy yisa shulchan el b'lechem aponim b'Shabbos. And the shulchan was inaugurated by putting the lechem aponim on it, not any other karban, not any other mincha. V'loy yisa menorah el b'shivas ner yisrael ben arbaim. And the way they would be mechanach the menorah is by lighting 7 candles. I'm not sure exactly what the alternative would be, but that's how you mechanach the menorah. Okay. So I told you the Mishnah starts off by saying that the Musaf and the Tamid are not ma'akiv each other. So I told you the conclusion of that, what that means is that the order doesn't matter. But we'll get there. Says the Gemara the following Shaila. Boi minei Rav Chia bar Avin mer Rav Chizda. Tzibar she'en lehem timidim u'musafim. Eiza mehen koidim. Okay, interesting Shaila. Bezdin comes to you and they say, listen, we cannot afford karbanos for both. We can't afford the Tamid and the Musaf. We can only afford one. Which one should we buy? The Tamid or the Musaf on Shabbos? It's interesting, Shab. That's the kasha. We can't afford both, we can only afford one. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. Well, what are we talking about? So says the Gemara, wait. Hechi dami. If we're talking about Shabbos morning, they come to you Shabbos morning, they say, listen, we only have one animal today. Or let's say 2, because the Musaf is actually 2 karbanos. We only have 2. Do we do the Tamid or do we do the Musaf? Here's the question. Why is that a Shaila? Tamid. Why? Musaf has, what does the Musaf have for you? It's got holiness, it's Shabbos. Check. The Tamid on Shabbos is also a karban of Shabbos. It's not the same Tamid throughout the week. It might be the same animal, but it has Kedusha Shabbos. And it has Tadir v'she'enoi Tadir Kaidim. Let's say they bring both. I have 2 animals. I can bring the Tamid Shel Shachar, Tamid Shel Ben Arbayim, or I can bring the Musaf, which is also 2 karbanos. So what do I do? So the Gemara says, that's obvious. You go Tamid. Why? Because the only Maila that the Musaf has is that it's Shabbos. The Tamid on Shabbos is also a Shabbos Dika Karban, meaning the Tamid of Shabbos is not the same as a Tamid of the weekday on Shabbos. On Shabbos is Shabbos. Shacharis on Shabbos is not Shacharis. It's Shacharis of Shabbos. So therefore, of course you go Tamid. There's no Shaila. You have Tadir v'she'enei Tadir. You have Kedusha Shabbos. Win. Easy. That's easy. Says the Gemara, Hechi dami ilim et tamid diyayma Musaf diyayma. Pshita de Tamidin Adif, Ta'avli Tadar Mekudish. So that's not a Shaila. Rather, the Shaila is like this. Tamidim dilamachar or Musafim de'idna. The case is like this. They come to you on Shabbos and they say, we have a choice. We could buy the Musaf of today or the Tamid of Sunday. Let's say they have enough for Shabbos, whatever it is. So the choice is, I can go Shabbos Musaf or Tamid of Sunday. Do we say Shabbos Musaf wins because it's Shabbos? Or does the tomorrow Tamid wins because Tadar? That's the Shaila. I know, so it's funny. The Radvaz has all arichos because the Radvaz says that there's a famous Radvaz. There's a very famous Radvaz. The Radvaz, I say famous because even if you're not holding it, the Radvaz was asked a shayla. Someone's in prison, and they get on a Tuesday morning. The warden comes to you and says, "You could leave prison for 1 tefillah." So the Radvaz asked, "Do you leave Tuesday morning, a random Tuesday morning, or do I wait 2 weeks from now? It's Rosh Hashanah." So Radvaz says, "You leave Tuesday morning, because the mitzvah that you have right now, we don't think about future mitzvahs that might be more holy." So he actually bases his shita on the conclusion of this Gemara. But this Gemara at this point is trying to think about that. Maybe it's kedai to wait for tomorrow and tadir as opposed to today, which is kadosh but not tadir. And that's the question. So the Gemara will try, I'll tell you why the Gemara is talking about this. The Gemara is going to try to figure out that perhaps that's what the Mishnah means. The Mishnah says, again, I'll read you the words of the Mishnah, I'll just say this outside, it's a little easier. Hatimidim ein ma'akvin es musafim. And musafim ein ma'akvin es timidim. The simple pshat of the Mishnah means is that the Tamid and the Musaf are not related to each other. Now again, the simple pshat is, option number 1, it means that if I could do one without the other. But that's a pella. Why would I think that you can't? What shaykhis does the Tamid have to the Musaf? What, I should think that if I can't bring the Musaf, I can't bring the Tamid? No shaykhis. Throw that pshat out. Other pshat is, what I told you, the conclusion, is that the order doesn't matter. The problem, the Gemara is going to throw that out also. It'll come back to it. But the Havamina is because, what do you mean the order doesn't matter? I thought the Tamid Shel Shachar has to be the first karban, and the Tamid Shel Ben Arbayim has to be the last. I thought the order very much matters. Throw that out. It must be the only pshat is, the Mishnah is addressing our case. The Tamid is not ma'akiv the Musaf, and the Musaf is not ma'akiv the Tamid. In other words, if you have a choice to buy either today's Musaf or tomorrow's Tamid, they're not ma'akiv each other. I.e., doesn't matter. Dealer's choice. Do whatever you want. They're not ma'akiv each other. They're fine. Whatever you want. Which is which one should I do? Whatever. Yes. The answer is yes. You do yes. Whatever. That's, the Gemara says, must be the pshat of the Mishnah. Because what else could the Mishnah mean? Let's see it inside. Says the Gemara. Amarlei, well, Tanisua, what does the Mishnah say? What does that mean? What does it mean? Perhaps it means the order doesn't matter. Meaning, you bring the Tamid first, great. You bring the Musaf first, great. You bring the Tamid Shei Bayim last, great. You bring the Musaf last, great. Order doesn't matter. Here's the problem. Is that true? But doesn't the Brisa say doesn't the Brisa specifically say the order very much matters? That the first carbon hayoim is supposed to be Tamid Shel Shachar? Talmud Loimar v'orich aleha ha'oila. It is the first oila. No other carbon first. Go to the next page. So the order very much matters. So throw that shot out. So what does the Mishnah mean? It must be the Mishnah is addressing our case. Ela pshita de lesle. The Gemara says it's talking about our situation, and what the Mishnah is basically telling you is dealer's choice. It does not matter. Whatever you want. Both have a maila. The Musaf has the option that it's Shabbos. The Tamid has the option that it's Tadir. Dealer's choice. So the Gemara says no. That's not what the Mishnah means. The Mishnah actually means the original pshat. The order doesn't matter. I thought the Talmud Shel Shachar is supposed to be first, the Talmud Shel Bayim is supposed to be last. The answer is, that's lichachila. The Mishnah is telling you that b'diavad it's fine. Yes, lichachila of course is in order. The Mishnah is telling you, ein ma'akvin, b'diavad is fine. But the Mishnah is not addressing our scenario at all. The Gemara says, amai tadir mekudish, tadir adif, el lav de lamachar, ukatani ein ma'akvin says, alma ki adadi ninu. So the Gemara says, is that not the case of the Mishnah? No, really, the Mishnah is talking about a case where you have all the karbanos, ulakadem, and the Mishnah's point is the order doesn't matter. I thought doesn't the pasuk tell me that the first carbon is supposed to be Tamid Shel Shachar and the last carbon is supposed to be Tamid Shel Bayim? The answer is l'mitzvah ba'alma. Yeah, lichachila, yes, but our Mishnah is telling us that b'diavad the order doesn't matter. Meaning, if you mess up, it's fine, doesn't matter. So we're still looking to try to address our scenario of, do I go with today's Musaf or tomorrow's Tamid? So Tashima, ein poichsin meshisha tloim hamevukarim belishkas hatloim k'dei l'shabis l'shnei yomim toivim shel Rosh Hashanah. Okay, there was a lishka that had all the lambs that were needed for the karbanos, that were needed for the oila and all that stuff in the Musaf. The Mishnah says, and they would check it 4 days early. You'd have to check the animal, make sure there's no blemishes. How many animals did they have as backup? So the Mishnah says they would always have 6 in reserves. Why 6? For the following situation. There's going to be a time where you need 6 karbanos. What is the time where I need 6 karbanos? 2 days Rosh Hashanah and then Shabbos. A 3-day Yom Tov. So you have Rosh Hashanah has 2 days of the Tamid Shel Shachar Tamid Shel Bayim, second day Tamid Shel Shachar Tamid Shel Bayim, and Shabbos. Okay. Now first of all, a strange thing when I read this Mishnah, I read this Gemara, I'm like, so I need on a random Tuesday in like July, I need 6 karbanos backed up because of a 3-day Rosh Hashanah. It's a strange thing, and the Gemara is eventually going to change the shot. Anyway, yes, you always need to have 6 as a backup for that scenario. Let me ask you a question. If I'm trying to make sure that I have karbanos ready for a 3-day Yom Tif of Rosh Hashanah, I need more than 6. 6 is the Tamids. You start counting the Musafim, it's a lot more. So why does the Mishnah say 6? It must be telling you that there's a situation where you only pick the Tamid and not the Musaf. Meaning, what the Mishnah is basically telling you, because the Mishnah is saying you need to have 6 ready and not the Musafim, only the Tamid, it's telling you Tamid wins. Tamid is king. And therefore, back to our original question, if you have a situation where I can go tomorrow's Tamid or today's Musaf, Tamid wins. Very fact that the Mishnah is not making you have more, it's telling you Tamid's the king. Because why? If the Mishnah is just telling you I need to make sure I have enough karbanos for a 3-day Yom Tif, I should have more than 6. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. If you're talking about a situation where it's a 3-day Yom Tov and they're bringing a Tamid and a Musaf, then Tuva have it. It should be way more than 6. I think they're bringing the data. It should be 22. If you count the Musafim of a 3-day Yom Tov of Shabbos and Rosh Hashanah, well, on Shabbos is 2, so 6 is 8, and then 14 because there's 7 on each day. 7 for Rosh Hashanah. For Rosh Hashanah, 7 day 2 of Rosh Hashanah and 2 on Shabbos. So that's 16 plus the 6 of the Tamid, it's 22. So the point is, if you're interested in making sure you have enough, so what's the answer? Why are you doing 6? The answer is because Tamid wins. That's the answer. Says the Gemara, El Abd Isla, you must be talking about a situation where I don't have enough animals. And it's telling me I should forego the Musaf today in order to have a Tamid tomorrow. So it shows you that the Tamid is king. Says the Gemara, Shma mina tmidim adav. Now, by the way, I was just thinking about it. It could be this is like a shkafic element of Tamid is consistency, and the Musaf is more Kaddish. Anyway, it's not for now. The Kitzer, so you see over here that the Talmud wins, because that's what it's talking about. So the Gemara says, no. Lo'ilam de Islay. V'hachi ka'amar, ein poichse meshisha tzloim ha'mavukarim belishkas ha'tzloim. Arbo yadm koim shchita. Umani ben bagbag hi. The Tanya ben bagbag oimer. Menayim l'tamid sheton bikar arbo yadm koim shchita. Tamaloimar. Tishmur lahakiv moyadoi. V'yilcha mishberes. Lonim mosheres arbo asa yadm. Malalon ton bikar arbo yadm koim shchita. Afkan ton bikar arbo yadm koim shchita. What it means like this. Says the Gemara, no. Really, you need to, it's not talking about a situation where I only have a certain amount of karbanos and it's telling me Tamidim are the king. No. It's not that at all. Because again, it sounds like we're talking about a 3-day Yom Tov, and it's choosing only the Tamidim and not the Musafim. Why? Because the Tamid, I don't have enough animals, and the Tamid wins. The Gemara says, no, that's not the case at all. It's telling you a side halacha, and that is, only the Tamidim need to be checked for 4 days out. The Musafim do not need to be checked 4 days out. So really we're talking about a case where you have enough animals. So why am I just talking about 6 Tamidim? Why not mention the 22 animals? The answer is, the other 16 do not need to be checked 4 days out. Ben Bagbad Shita is that Menayim L'Tamid Sheton Bikar Arbaim Yom. Only the Tamid needs to be checked 4 days out because the Pasuk compares the Tamid to the Karm Pesach. But when it comes to, let's say the Musaf, it doesn't need to be checked 3 days out. 4 days out. It can be checked 3 days out, 2 days out, 1 day out. So the reason why it mentions the Talmud is not talking about a situation where I don't have enough animals. It's telling me a side halacha. Says the Gemara, I have a problem. Amrli Ravina Ravashi. Okay, fine. I get what you're saying. You're talking about a situation where we're talking about I need to have enough animals for 3-day Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah going into Shabbos. I shouldn't be 22. So the Gemara first thought we're talking about a situation where I don't have enough animals and it's telling me Tamid is king, it beats the Musaf. Gemara says, no. I have enough animals. It's telling me a side halacha that you only have to check the Talmud 4 days out, not the Musaf. Here's a question: is it really 6? Brad would appreciate this. If you were running the Beis Hamikdash and you were the Gabbai for the Beis Hamikdash, and you were saying, and I tell you, listen, hey, I need to check 4 days out for the Talmud. You're like, okay, I need 6. No, you should actually need a lot more than 6. I'll tell you why. Motzei Yom Tif, the second Yom Tif is over, right? If you need to have ready because you can't check on Yom Tif and 4 days is too much, and you have 6, you should at least need 7 because Yom Tif ends at night, and the next morning you already need the Talmud Shel Shachar. Now you might be able to get it by Talmud Shel Bin Arbaim, but you're telling me the Beis Hamikdash it runs out of its supply the second the 3-day Yom Tif is over, and then the next morning they're like, oh, we'll figure that out tomorrow. That doesn't make any sense. The Gemara says, if you're telling me it's supposed to be get ready for Talmud Shel Ben Abayim of the Tamidim for a 3-day Yom Tif, you should have 7 karbanos because the second Yom Tif is over. Talmud Shel Shachar is right around the corner. And says the Gemara, there's the morning of the next day. So says the Gemara. The Gemara says no. The Gemara says, well, if you're going to count the next day, count the Erev Yom Tif. Then it should be 8. So the Gemara says, no, that doesn't bother me too much. The Mishnah is only listing from Yom Tif on. We're not worried about pre-Yom Tif. We're talking about post-Yom Tif. Yom Tif and post-Yom Tif. You should need 7. So says the Gemara, it's a good shaila. So you know the Gemara answers? Tana ba'alma koi. Umaykei Shabbos shene Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah simna ba'alma. You know the answer is you completely misunderstand what this Bryce is talking about at all. You know this Bryce was actually saying that we need to have 3 days enough to meet him for a 3-day Yom Tov? Because that's what it says, Shabbos and 2 days Rosh Hashanah. So I told you before I had a problem. Then why in the middle of July do I need to have it ready for a Shabbos Rosh Hashanah randomly whenever that happens? So the Gemara says, you don't actually need to prepare for a 3-day Yom Tov. What the Mishnah is telling me, I always need to have 6 Tamidim ready. I need to be 3 days ahead. This has nothing to do with Shabbos and Yom Tov. This has nothing to do with Tamid beating a Musaf. And what about a 3-day Yom Tov? Don't I need the next morning? No. This has nothing to do with any of this. You completely made a mountain out of a molehill. The Mishnah is just telling me that we always had 3 days of reserves. Nothing else. So why does it say Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah? It's just an easy way to remember. No, it has nothing to do. It's not a halachic. It's not like, well, I'm not going to be able to check because of Yom Tov. I need 6. What about 7? The answer is, it has nothing to do with that. It's telling me as a practical halacha. I always need to be 3 days ahead. And the reason why I mentioned Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah is just an easy way to remember. 2 days Yom Tov, Shabbos, 3. It could have just said you need 3 days reserves. What about the 3.5? Chazal only machmer or 3 days. But the point is, it's not something that it's not like we're actually worried that on Yom Tov, I'm not going to be able to get animals. Because if it's talking on Yom Tov, I'm not going to be able to get animals problem, I'm going to need 7, I'm going to need 8. The answer is, it's telling me I always need 3 days reserves. Always. The Beis HaMikdash always had reserves. How much? 3 days. Why does it mention Shabbos Rosh Hashanah? It's just an easy mnemonic device to remember. Nothing else. Nothing deeper. It's not talking about Shabbos Rosh Hashanah. That's the point. There's no Musaf on a Tuesday. It's not talking about, it's not... No. Because you only need reserves for a Talmud. The Talmud was a daily carbon. You don't need reserves for a random Shabbos and a random Yom Tov. You only need reserves for the daily Yom Tovim, and how many reserves? 3. It said Shabbos and Yom Tov, and that made us think about Musaf and this. It's no Shaykh Shabbos and Yom Tov. It's just telling the Gabbai of the Beis HaMikdash, always have 3 days out. That's it. So you don't run it low. That's it. Nothing deeper. All right, we'll stop here.